Hey everybody, welcome to your horoscopes for the week. These are the horoscopes for the week ending April 1st, April Fool's Day. You guys have some good pranks out there. I don't know. My dad was like the epitome of April Fool's Day, and he loved it, and he loved trying to get me. So just because he's not in a physical body, I expect him to do that still. Because they don't change much, when they leave this world and move to the next. They stay, um, in many cases, very much the same. We are going to go ahead and, oh, wait, before we go ahead and hop into it, we have yet another Mercury or yet another retrograde free week, I should say. Let's not talk about Mercury. Mercury is going retrograde soon, but not this week. So we continue to have another retrograde free week. Everything is moving forward. Life is good. Let's keep it that way, shall we? We're going to go ahead and get started as we always do with Aries. We have the sun in Aries this week, continuing to have the sun in Aries, continuing to have Jupiter in Aries. We also have Mercury in Aries. So we have a lot going on in Aries, which is expected, obviously, at this time of year. I mean, after all, it is Aries season. So that usually indicates a lot of planet activity. And in many ways, there are, a couple of challenges there, of course, but it's really working out in your favor also. We're going to start with the little bit of a challenge here with the sun continuing to be in a square with Mars. Mars is 0 degrees. We kick off the week 0 degrees in Cancer. So it's right on the cusp of Gemini and Cancer, actually, which gives it a couple of different influences. And when we're talking about a couple of different influences here, we're talking specifically air and water, which absolutely are two completely different monsters when you think about it. One's very analytical, one's very emotional. And this has to do with how you're processing your anger, specifically in your career, because of course we're very much focused on career. Aries is focused on career. All the planets that are in Aries are focused on career. So we're literally looking at work issues that come up. And, in one way you could be trying to overthink the problem, and that's causing an issue with trying to find a resolution to the problem. Or you could be overly emotional. And unfortunately, if this is a very emotional trigger, then, especially with Mars being focused on past trauma, this is a very emotional trigger. You may have to kind of work through the trigger a little bit. So it's, to me, this works out for you guys in terms of, or it actually, I wouldn't say works out, but in a way it does. But it plays out as situations coming up at work that are creating this response. And if you're overly emotionally reacting, or if you're overly overthinking the problem, you're not going to find a solution, or the solution that you come to is not necessarily a solution that's going to work very well for you. Pardon the cat who just decided to go ahead and interrupt everything that I'm doing here, because it's his office, right? You definitely don't want to do that either, by the way. I don't think that's necessarily going to work out in your favor. Take it on a case-by-case basis. The good news is we do have Jupiter continuing to influence your sign. We're expanding and growing in your career. Now, when you're expanding and growing in your career, there's always going to be these little hang-ups that sort of come up and screw things up. So it's part of the journey, and it's part of the challenge when you think about it. Mercury is actually very interesting, especially as it joins the sun with a sextile with the moon right at the beginning of the week. There's this fantastic moon and energy. And even though it is also bringing inner trauma in an emotional, very emotional way, I feel like talking through this trauma is really what's important here. It's having that outlet, somebody there to listen, while you verbally process what's going on. The thing that I've learned is that when I'm in my head about something and I'm thinking about it and thinking about it, I get more emotional and my reaction gets more emotional. And then I want to react to the emotion. And then it just turns into a big old mess. And we want to avoid a big old mess. But if I sit down and talk to somebody about the problem, it winds up sounding, I can even see that the problem really isn't as big as what I'm turning it into in my head mentally. So this is a really good outlet for you to be able to let some of that frustration out, maybe get some advice if you need it, and then go back to the problem with a level head, so that you can continue to progress in your career goals, if that makes sense. It seems like a whole lot, but it it really isn't. I mean, we're looking at specific situations that are taking place, and just a little reminder that if you overreact or overthink it, it's probably going to make it difficult for you. We always want to balance out making sense of something but feeling something at the same time, so that we can make an educated decision. And if you're trying to go one way or the other, it tends to not work out for you very well. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Taurus, Uranus and Venus move into conjunction with each other in your sign this week. And neither one of these planets is interacting with any other planets other than each other, which is an absolutely fantastic energy to work with, to be honest with you, especially since there's been a lot of difficult challenges in terms of how Uranus has been working with other planets. To have that disappear and to have Venus come in and have them working together, it's kind of like magic for you guys, especially because Venus is really bringing this powerful creativity into what it is that you're doing at this time, and moving closer and closer into conjunction with Uranus. Uranus is all about rebelling. It's all about looking at things out of the box. It's all about new and crazy ideas and adding a little creativity to these crazy ideas. The sky is the limit, really. I see out of this a couple of different things. One, or how it's going to play out for you guys. One, I feel like there are ideas that you may have had for a while, maybe even shelved them, or it's something that keeps popping up in your mind, that all of a sudden it's like you find the ways to turn those ideas into actions. And it really, I can't stress the word magic enough. It just feels like this is magically taking place in some way. The other thing that I feel is really important for you guys, because focus really is on your support system in terms of what Uranus and Venus are focused on for you. So when we're talking about creativity in your support system, there's a couple of things that come up for me. One, I feel like when you have a problem, or when you need to work through to find a solution for something, we usually have our go-to people for that specifically. But Uranus's influence is more like, this is a specific issue, so you need specific support. And I feel like one of the magical things that's going to take place is that support system will open up, or it's almost like, you're not even looking for the person that can help you, and boom, there they are, kind of thing. So it's really nice. I mean, honestly, you guys deserve not just a break, but like a whole series of really long breaks after some of the challenges that have been taking place for you guys. And these last few weeks where we haven't had those types of issues, things seem to feel like they're flowing a little bit better. This planet lineup is going to boost that from flowing to, Californians really understand this, from a nice little trickle to a raging river, and things are just literally moving forward in a way that can be a little bit overwhelming because things are happening so quickly. But at the same time, it really feels good to really get moving, if that makes sense. So you guys enjoy that and make the most of it and create some magical things with that energy, which I know you will. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Gemini. Mars is officially out of your sign. It is official. Yes, he is on the cusp, so you will still feel his influence a little bit this week. Pretty much starting to the influence be moving away from you by the end of the week, so you won't feel it quite as much, but it's still official. Mars is out of your sign. Congratulations, Geminis. You guys made it. And that's awesome. But however, um, let's just add the moon into Gemini while Mars is leaving to make sure that Mars leaves with a bang, right? And that's exactly how we're going to do it this week. In fact, that's exactly how we're going to kick off this week. Really, the moon is in Gemini by Monday in conjunction with Mars. And when planets come into conjunction with each other, honestly, they're really helping each other, with focus continuing to be on your trauma, your old trauma, your inner trauma. To have two highly volatile emotional planets working together doesn't seem like it would be helpful at all, but in some ways it is. You guys have been working through this trauma, obviously, for several weeks. This is where we've been, it almost feels like we've been stuck in this focus for a while. And unfortunately, you're going to be stuck in this focus still for a couple of more weeks. Even as the planets move out, the focus continues to stay. It just won't be quite as difficult and challenging as it feels like it has been, if that makes sense. Mars and the moon moving into conjunction with each other, focused mainly on your trauma space, will do one of two things. One, it may bring up some old trauma issues, which is unpleasant, but it's bringing up these issues specifically in order to help you release them. And one of the things that I find interesting in my own healing process is that coincidences are not a thing, but synchronicities definitely are. It really is the same thing. But when a specific situation keeps coming up over and over and over again, when you're faced with the same trigger over and over and over again, that's your, whether you call it the universe, whether you call it your God, your body, your soul, whatever, reminding you, your higher self even, reminding you that this is an issue that's ready to come out. And in order for you to have the opportunity to do it, you're going to be presented with several different opportunities to take care of that. Now, you can make the choice and not do that, but you're dragging it out, and it is going to be more difficult. The more you avoid a lesson, the more difficult the challenge becomes in order to learn it. We all make those mistakes. I try not to, but I do it all the time because, just like you guys, I really just don't want to take the time and the energy to deal with that. Like I have a choice, right? None of us really do. It's part of our evolution. The moon's squares, I'm sorry, Mars and the moon's squares, specifically on Monday with Neptune as well as the sun. Also a little bit interesting here because these two planets are very much focused on career, and Neptune is in Pisces while the sun is in Aries. So it sort of brings these two different influences as well. You've got a very emotional sign with Pisces, and then Aries is a fire sign. So it can be highly volatile, it can be highly emotional, it can be highly energetic. When we're talking about Aries, it's highly everything, right? They don't have a calm place. They're very energetic, and so everything is usually to the extreme. This to me feels like in some cases what's playing out here is, one, because of Neptune, these emotions are blocking your intuition, which they will do. They're very known to do that. And when your emotions are blocking your intuition, It really does feel like you're flying blind in some way, shape, or form. The sun's house is where you shine, and focused on your career right now, you want to make sure that the triggers that are coming up and the things that are coming up and the things that want to be released are not keeping you from moving forward in your career. Now, I'm thinking specifically, and she'll know exactly who I'm talking about as soon as she hears this, of a Gemini client of mine who is going through this. I need to work, I need an income, it's sort of a back and forth type of decision making thing. And this is exactly what I'm talking about here, because a lot of times we put our own fears from past places that we've worked before. We have worries about what's going to happen. The security is breached. And of course, with Mars being in Cancer right now, security is like a really big deal, right? So you're picking up on that as well. The biggest thing is I feel like worrying about what the outcome is more destructive than not doing anything at this point. Because if you're doing something and you're worrying about what the outcome is, you're actually working against yourself in some way. Obviously, if you don't worry and you don't do anything, that doesn't help either. You've got to do what you can to solve this issue without overreacting, if that makes sense. And I know how hard that can be in some situations. But unfortunately, I also know that overreacting in many situations isn't really helpful in the long term, especially around work. It's just not a good idea at all. At the same time, on the flip side, if there are issues at work that have not been resolved, that have gone on for a really long time, these issues may come to a head at this point, which in some cases that needs to happen in order for things to be resolved at all. So a little bit crazy there at the beginning of the week, but things do start to calm down as the week progresses. And of course, obviously, the farther and farther you get away, or I should say, the farther and farther Mars gets away from Gemini, by the end of the week, it'll be far enough away that it's not even influencing you guys at all, and you can relax. And it's about time. You guys have earned it. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Cancer. Mars is moving on into Cancer. Actually, Mars moved on into Cancer last week, but it's officially moving on in this week as we begin the week in 0 degrees Cancer, which is right there at the beginning, and end the week at 3 degrees. So it's moving on in, basically. We're officially in there. Cancer's focus is on self with Pallas Athene, also continuing to influence your sign as well. And Mars influence is very much in or focused on inner trauma, what I like to call the secret closet. It's the place where we keep our traumas, we store our traumas. In many cases, we some of us hoard our traumas. That is a thing, really. It doesn't make much sense, but we do it. And unfortunately, when you're talking about Mars and then you're talking about inner trauma, we're specifically pinpointing old anger that may be coming up, which might be a little bit uncomfortable. And it's definitely going to be uncomfortable as we move into the moon moves into your sign on Wednesday, coming in conjunction with Mars, and very much a part of a square that exists between the sun and Mercury most of the week with Mars. The moon kind of sort of joins this and creates an even more emotional layer, just in case you needed more, right? I mean, Mars can already be a very emotional sign. Cancer can already be I said sign, but I meant planet. Cancer is an emotional sign ruled by the moon, which is also an emotional planet. This is like a lot of emotion here. So my advice is, what I see playing out in this particular aspect is issues coming up either around work or at work. We're talking specifically about Neptune, which is also a very emotional planet, rules things such as intuition, and the sun, which is the house that you shine in at the moment. And nothing makes it difficult for you to shine in the workplace like an emotional meltdown, right? Actually, no, that really does not necessarily work in your favor. So it's really important this week, I feel, especially when once we get into the moon coming into your sign Tuesday and a little bit into Wednesday, I feel there's a couple of things that are really important. One, grounding and bubbling is very necessary because you definitely don't want to be sponging everybody else's energy. And if you don't know how to ground and bubble, put a comment down here and say, please show me how to ground and bubble. There is a video on my one of my playlists under informational videos on how to ground and bubble. So if you can't find it, put a comment down there and I will put the link in there for you, make it really easy. Bubbling to me is when I put my shields up and I say, okay, I really don't want to take on energy from other sources, from other people, right? A lot of us go in and we sponge that energy in and we don't realize that we're sponging that energy in and it's just exhausting, and we go home and we barely crawl through the door and just crash on the floor because we're so exhausted because we went to Costco or Walmart or something like that. I don't enter those places without my bubble. I want to go in. I don't want to take on your stuff. I don't want to feel it. I don't even want to see your dead people, nothing. I just want to go in. I want to do my shopping and then I want to leave. And I have very strict boundaries on that. For you guys, I feel that what's really important here is to shield yourself from other people's emotions so that you can deal with what you're dealing with without the influence of everybody else's stuff coming in, making it even more overwhelming than it needs to be. The good news is that as Mars comes into your sign, it comes in a trine with Saturn, and the moon also joins that trine as well. Saturn's focus is on long-term goals, and Saturn is interesting because Saturn really has everything to do with responsibility. What is your responsibility? What is other people's responsibility? Identifying between what is yours and what isn't. And on one hand, your trauma closet is absolutely your responsibility. We know that. But we're also looking at our responsibility towards our long-term goals. And I feel like Saturn sort of picks you up out of that overly emotional space to help you focus on the plan and what you need to do to get there. So it does seem like there's a lot going on this week, but I don't feel that it's anything that you guys can't handle either, because honestly, you guys rock at being able to handle those sorts of things. And that square that Mars was in with the Sun and Mercury is over by the end of the week. And now Mars is actually sitting in a place that is a little bit more helpful than it is holding you back. So don't worry about it when things get crazy, because things always work themselves out. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And now we're moving on to Leo. The moon is going to round out the end of the week for you guys this week, moving into a square with Uranus the first day, as well as an opposition with Pluto, which is going to be a little bit challenging, a little bit difficult, specifically because focus is on the past for you guys this week. And the moon bringing up emotional stuff from the past isn't just never a pleasant thing to begin with. When we start interacting in difficult ways with other planets, then it becomes even more annoying. This square with Uranus's focus is on your support system, and actually that's a square with Uranus and Venus because they're very much in conjunction with each other right now, meaning they're like right next to each other, or in our view, they are, because it's impossible for them to actually be right next to each other. And so we're talking about issues with having support, specifically issues that are have roots in past issues. So we're looking at current issues that have roots in past issues, which make it even more difficult. The moon's opposition with Pluto. Pluto is focused on relationships. So again, we're looking at difficulties with relationships that have roots in the past. Now, I mean, honestly, most of us have these kinds of things and different levels of these kinds of things. Some people have bigger issues, I guess, than say maybe other people do. So obviously, I feel that circumstances that are taking place are, of course, what's going to bring up these triggers, which, of course, is going to send you down the rabbit hole of where these triggers came from. There's really two things about that that I feel are important to pay attention to. One, if you don't have the space in the moment to deal with the trigger, obviously working through the trigger in the moment quickly to get it out of the way so that you can deal with the situation at hand is one thing that you need to do. But it's also important when you go home to pick up the trigger and to take the time to understand where these things are coming from. Now, it doesn't mean you're not going to be angry about it anymore. In my view, in my experience of working through my triggers, is the level of emotion that changes. So it becomes less debilitating and more something that I can deal with and quickly sort of put in its place while I deal with what I'm trying to deal with in the moment. The moon's trine with the sun is actually a very helpful aspect because we're looking at career. When we're talking about the sun, we're looking at career. And when we're talking about emotional stuff in the past being helpful towards your career, that doesn't sound like it makes any sense, but it really does. When you have trauma, you connect with other people that also have trauma. Now, that can be a double-edged sword in some ways. If you feel like you're a victim of this person's trauma, that's not good. But it does help you understand the person better. And when you understand the person better, you're able to interact and communicate with them better in a way that makes sense to them. And honestly, there's something magical when an individual with trauma meets another individual with trauma. It's like instant connection, instant friendship that in many cases makes things easier regardless of what the conversation is, if that makes sense. When we move on to the end of the week on Saturday, April Fool's Day, I wish I could say the moon's gone, but no, I can't. Unfortunately, but things are not as difficult as they were the day before. There's more major challenges. These are challenges that are a little bit smaller. We do still have a square with Uranus and Venus, so that support issue continues to remain, but our trine with the sun is now opened up to be a trine with Jupiter as well. And this is an opportunity actually to take a look back at your various career successes in order to help you determine the next steps you need to make in order to expand in what you're doing right now. So it is helpful. What I will say is that when you're exploring the past for something helpful, it's very common to get caught up in the things that weren't helpful and to sit there and sort of fester in that. So you do want to be aware of that and make sure that you avoid those traps as much as you can, because it's really not the right energy you want to put into expanding and growing in your career unless you're letting it go and working through it. And it's necessary specifically for that. It isn't necessary to deal with it right this second, if that makes sense. So outside of the very end of the week, when the moon comes in, things are relatively calm. The dark moon continues to be in Leo and continues to be retrograde this week as well. So the dark moon's really all about making major changes focused on the past. That's very interesting. You can't change the past. You can't change how things happened. You can only change how you react to it and how things happen from here on out, depending on whether you have control over it or not. Because there's a lot of things that we don't have control over either. So I feel like this actually plays out in many ways for you guys as more of a chance to really not so much change things, but to accept the things you can't change, if that makes sense. Which acceptance is also a very important part of the lesson. It is very difficult to accept things that we don't want to accept, but once we do, it's like a weight sort of comes off of our shoulders, knowing that we've let go and released the need to make it change in some way or wish it would change or something along those lines, which unfortunately, as we all know, doesn't really do much. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Virgo, focus is on the home this week as Ceres continues to be retrograde and moves back into Virgo this week, actually. Ceres is known as the Great Mother. So there's a very maternal, nurturing sort of influence when it comes to Ceres. In retrograde, I feel like that maternal sort of nurturing influence really should be present in your environment, if that makes sense. And I feel like this really revolves around self-care for you guys. Not to say that Virgos are not good at self-care. I think that in all honesty, I've seen both. I've seen the ones that completely ignore their self-care. I've seen those that are completely infatuated with themselves and what they consider to be self-care. I've seen Virgos that, have a tendency to be sort of in the middle of those two. Either way, this is about self-care, bringing that self-care into your environment, whether it's reminders of taking care of yourself, or specifically things in your environment that make you feel good. Things, pictures, I'm getting a goal board actually, and a goal board, I think it has another name, but basically it's a board that you put various different things on that you want to do. So if you want to take a cruise, you put that on your board. If you need a new car, you put that on your board, kind of a thing. And it's something that you can look at that continues to remind you of what you're working towards, what you're trying to do, which puts a different energy, a completely different energy into just having to pay bills and make sure you have a roof over your head and food in your belly. That gets very difficult. And I think in many cases for Virgos, you guys struggle so much with responsibility and doing the right thing and taking care of you and doing the right thing for you specifically, that it gets kind of difficult. That fight within yourself gets kind of difficult after a while. Bringing something into your space that allows you to be able to look at it, hear it, smell it, what have you, that helps you to relax, is promoting self-care. It allows you to let all that stuff go, all the worries, everything that you've done, and just sort of give yourself a breathing space. It's almost like an instant meditation room without having to put a meditation room in the space necessarily. So I feel like this week's focus really is about promoting that relaxation into your space in some way in order to help you with your self-care goals, if that makes sense. So that is what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Libra, focus continues to be on those you love this week, with not much to influence that at all, really. Ceres is retrograde and out of your sign right now. Moon's not coming in this week. No planets are actually scheduled to go into Libra anytime soon, honestly, outside of the moon, which, I mean, can be a good thing or a bad thing. It pretty much is what it is. Focus on those you love this week. I kind of feel like there's a couple of things that come out of this. And one of the first things actually that I'm picking up around this focus on those you love this week is identifying how you focus on those you love and making the changes necessary for their growth as well as yours. This is a really big deal, actually, because the term martyr is used with Libra for a reason. Libras really tend to self-sacrifice a lot. And of course, they self-sacrifice for those they love more than anybody else. And in some cases, you really want to look at this sacrifice as, is this really what they need, or am I enabling them, kind of thing? Especially with Libra parents, this is very difficult, and specifically with female Libra parents, this is really, really difficult to let go, and just sort of in many ways allow your kids to be what they're going to be and do what they're going to do, kind of a thing. Even as adults, it's very common to worry about your children and whether or not they're going to make it, even specifically if you're seeing things about them that trigger those worries, like they're not very good with money, and things like that. However, this is what they need to do in order to learn how to do it, and they are definitely not going to learn how hard the world is by taking care of their parents. So I feel like in some cases, this is a good opportunity when things come up, when you're needed by other people, to really look at this relationship and make sure that you are helping and you're not enabling, specifically around relationships that seem very draining to you. And this is why it's important, because it's not just helpful to them for them to learn on their own. It's helpful for you to free up space to do what you need to do. And the other thing about this is, or the other layer, I should say, to this is, a lot of people, and Libras are definitely not an exception to this rule, will put all of their time and their energy and their focus on other people because they're ignoring their own stuff. And that's very scary. And of course, it's hard to let go of control over somebody else, because that your own stuff is sitting there staring at you, been waiting all this time for you to stop saying, I just don't have time because this person keeps taking up all my time. So this week is also a good opportunity to just stop ignoring that stuff and start working on it, start getting it done. So with that being said, that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Scorpio. Scorpio is in between focuses at the moment with no planet influences. So we continue to be sort of in between that focus, from one focus to another. And I will say that's probably going to go on for a couple of weeks, actually. As at this time, this house is pretty big. So you're kind of in the middle, while the other two signs on either side of you are sort of taking on all the focus, and you guys get a little bit of a break, which is kind of nice. Everybody deserves a break every now and then. I feel like a couple of things, or at least I'm being shown a couple of things coming up for you guys this week. One thing that I love about not having a focus is it does give you a choice to focus on what you want to do, because nothing specific is coming up. At the same time, I also feel that it is very necessary for you guys to play. The word play seems to be coming up around you guys a lot. I feel like in many cases for Scorpios, you guys are very emotionally intelligent and intellectually intelligent. And, most of the Scorpios that I know are darn hard workers too. And these are always really good things, of course, but it's also necessary, absolutely necessary, to take the time to play every now and then. Taking care of your responsibilities is great, and you should do that. But if you don't take the time to play, it's almost like those responsibilities just aren't worth it. There's something about your mental and emotional balance that is lacking without the playtime and the fun time and just giving yourself that time, if that makes sense. So I feel like, seeing as how you don't have anything to focus on, focusing on bringing that joy from playing into your life is really, really necessary this week. And the more you can play, the better you're gonna feel. I mean, actually, honestly, even makes you feel younger, even if it's just for a minute. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Sagittarius, focus is on your day-to-day schedule this week, which honestly, for most Sagittarians, is really not all that fun. I mean, schedule, throw the schedule out the window. Who needs it, right? Not the most fun thing in the world for Sagittarians, but the good news is we have no other influences other than that. No planets coming into Sagittarius this week, no moon. We will have the moon next week. Let's enjoy a moon-free week this week. With focus on your day-to-day schedule, I feel it's really important, actually. What's coming up for me for you guys this week is that it's really important to incorporate something into your schedule that is absolutely brand new. Sagittarius needs new things, needs new experiences. I don't think that Sagittarians ever outgrow that either. I don't feel that there's a Sagittarius that can get to the point where they are so old they can't enjoy a new experience every now and then. It's part of your nature. And if you don't do it, life gets really boring. And when life gets boring, that is absolutely like hell for Sagittarius. It's the worst possible thing that can happen to a Sagittarian. So incorporating something new into your schedule this week kind of shakes up the monotony a little bit. And it doesn't have to be much. It can be playing a different game on your phone than the one that you normally play. It can be watching a TV show that you normally wouldn't watch, but you're going to give it a chance and check it out and see, what happens. And I've been pleasantly surprised actually quite a few times, specifically recently with the Yellowstone series. It's absolutely amazing. And I'm not a fan of Westerns, but I can't get enough of all of it. It's just that good. I'm really glad that I gave it a chance and allowed myself to open up to something that I'm not normally interested in watching or not go out of my way to watch, if that makes sense. So new experiences don't have to be obviously expensive or time consuming, but shaking things up by bringing something new or just doing something different actually helps to keep the momentum going, is so that things don't get stale, or things don't get bored. The other thing that I'm picking up for you guys this week is that I feel like there may be some extra time on your schedule this week, and it may not look like that at first, but it's sort of this extra time just pops into your schedule, and you're like, oh, what do I do with this extra time? Which could be a perfect time to start exploring putting a little something new and shaking things up into your schedule. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we're going to move on to Capricorn. Technically, Pluto is 0 degrees Aquarius. So technically, Pluto is not in your sign, but it is on the cusp. So it is still technically there, unfortunately. And you are technically still going to feel the effects of him. Focus is on relationships, including Pluto's focus on relationships. And we have some interesting stuff actually going on this week. We don't have the moon coming into Capricorn, but we do have the moon moving into opposition, specifically a T-square with Pluto, as well as, I do believe that's the sun. Yes, that is the sun. So moving into a bit of a T-square with the sun and the moon this week. Moon's focus is on self, the sun's focus is on career. Pluto's focus is, almost right on the cusp of relationships and money, actually, your relationship to money. I kind of feel like this challenge sort of comes up for you guys, not specifically because, how do I want to say this? Not specifically because you need help building relationships, but I feel like when you feel yourself in an emotional space, most Capricorns are not very emotional people. They tend to be the people that you can rely on. They tend to be very reliable people. So when you get emotional, it's like everybody at work goes, "Oh my God, we don't know what to do," because the reliable person is emotional. I feel like there's two things that are coming up with this. One, it is important to deal with your emotions. And if you can't and you don't like to do it privately, which I understand, being an Aquarius, do it privately. Um, if you try to avoid it even privately, what happens is that it willy-nilly comes out at a time that is very inconvenient for you and quite possibly everybody around you. So that's one of those things. I feel like the moon coming in at this time is sort of going to bring some of those things to the surface, and it may bring those things to the surface in a way that is inappropriate, specifically if you're trying to work on something currently right now. The other thing is that be aware of, um when you're when you're trying to push something to happen, as you get more and more frustrated and the levels of your frustration go up and up and up, and you're trying to make it happen and make it happen and make it happen, you wind up making mistakes because you're just not focused on it in the right way, or you wind up creating more blocks for you to try and get over, which is frustrating, and nobody wants to deal with that. Take a step away from what it is that you're doing. Take a 15-minute break, do some grounding, do some bubbling, clear your head, and then move back to it. Chances are the fix is right there in front of you and you're just not seeing it because you're so frustrated. That's really going to be a thing for like a day on Thursday, and then really not that as big of a deal the rest of the week. Pluto itself, as we get into the end of the week, moves into a square with Mercury. Mercury is at this time, of course, in Aries and focused on your career. So again, we're talking about challenges within the relationships that pertain to our work and our career, which is always difficult. And a lot of Capricorns that I've met, and you can say this isn't true if you want to and deny it, and that's quite okay with me. But most of the Capricorns that I know, it is their way. They know how to do it. Everybody else does not. And so there's two things that come from this sort of makeup. One, as hard as it can be, understanding that everybody has a different process is going to be helpful because it helps you release the control over the fact that everybody else is doing it wrong. If it's not causing problems, it's not a situation that needs to be fixed. If it is causing problems, that's a different story. But it's because the squares with Mercury, it's all about how you communicate the problem. If you approach it in a you're doing that wrong way, it's not going to be taken very well. And unfortunately, finding a resolution to the problem is going to take a while. If you approach it in a more diplomatic way, do you mind if I show you a way that would make it a little bit easier? People tend to be a little bit more open to a little criticism, if you know what I mean. Pluto's sextile with Neptune is also really helpful because Neptune is also focused on career at this time. And Neptune's all about intuition. So rather than trying to make sense of the situation and overthink your way through the situation, let your intuition come in and give you a hand. That's what it's there for, right? It makes things so much easier and it will cut the work that you need to do in half. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Aquarius, focus is on finances, and we have Pluto officially in Aquarius this week. Of course, it started last week, but it's still official, 0 degrees. Not going to move much further than 0 degrees before it goes retrograde and goes right back into Capricorn anyways. But for now, we get to enjoy the influence of Pluto. Pluto is all about your personal power, your ability to transform yourself. We Aquarians are fixed signs. Transformation and change is not necessarily something that most Aquarians embrace change, and yet we are known as the ones to create change. So no, we don't make any sense, and that's why nobody understands us. And you know what? That's okay. We understand each other, right? That's all that's important. Pluto's influence on Thursday, because Pluto is in Aquarius, unfortunately, we're going to feel this one a little bit more so than others, but the moon moves into opposition with Pluto, creating a T-square with Mercury. Now, Mercury is the planet of communication. Mercury is focused on career. Right now, Pluto is focused on relationships, although Aquarius is on finances. So when we have this influence of the moon coming in, which is very much focused on self, it sort of feels like it's all on us. Basically, your career goals, your everything is down to you. You're solely responsible for making it or breaking it, and that is a very difficult place to be. It's a scary place to be for most people, and Aquarians are not the exception to that rule. Unfortunately, we can sure fake like it is not a problem for us, but deep down inside we know it is a problem. So I feel a couple of things are coming out of this. One, it's really important to have the right relationships to help you move forward in your career goals. And it's also really important, Aquarians, to use those relationships. Actually, most of the time, we have everybody we need right there. It's just that we are unwilling to use them. I don't know why, but that is the case. We're such independent people that God forbid we ever need help. And actually, asking for help makes you a smarter person. It makes you a stronger person. It makes you a more well-rounded person. It makes you a more successful person. Nobody was ever successful on their own. It took other people helping them out. And when you're solely the hermit that's, in your little cave on your own, kind of hiding out, trust me when I say it really does create some problems, and it makes moving forward just that much more difficult. So I feel like this is one of those situations that comes up that really reminds you, if you had the support system that you should be putting into place for your goals, this situation would not be as challenging as it could be, if that makes sense. Pluto continues that square with Mercury throughout the week. So it's not a T-square all week. It only is for one day, but throughout the week, Pluto and Mercury continue to be in that squared position. So this is really about identifying those relationships that are helpful to your career goals or are hindering your career goals. And you can't look at this emotionally, because if you do, you're going to be looking at it in a panicky way. And panicky ways don't necessarily make the best decisions when you're in a panic. You have to look at it from a very logical place, something that is really easy for us Aquarians. We also have Pluto in a sextile with Neptune, which is also focused on career. Also very interesting. Just because you're highly intelligent does not mean you're not highly intuitive either. And using your intuition, being open to clearing your mind out so that there's room for the intuition to come in, is very helpful and very necessary as well. And I honestly, my guides are my biggest support system. Without them, I don't know where I'd be, but as a person with trust issues, I rely on them more than any other living person because they have not let me down yet. And your intuition is ruled in many ways by your guides. So invite them in and let them help you. To me, it's like I have a whole company and all of these employees, they just can't take phone calls, unfortunately, not from anybody but me, anyways. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And finally, we are moving into Pisces. We officially have Saturn in Pisces, and we continue, of course, to have Neptune in Pisces as well. They're like bookends. Uh, Saturn is right at the beginning of Pisces, and Neptune is right towards the end of Pisces. They're 25 degrees, so 4 degrees away from the end. Does that mean he's leaving? Absolutely not. He's absolutely not leaving your sign this year at all. Actually, I've already kind of sort of bumped ahead and looked at that. Saturn's trine with Mars is actually very interesting. Focus is on career for Pisces, but Saturn brings long-term goals and the responsibility of your long-term goals into prominence. And what's interesting about this is um that it sort of showcases your responsibility to your goals. So you can't necessarily just say, I want to be a pilot and then leave it at that. Saturn's coming in and saying, okay, you want to be a pilot, let's create a goal, right? By this time, I'm going to find a school. And by this time, I'm going to come up with the money for the school. And by this time, I'm going to sign up for the school. And by this time, I'm going to be a pilot, kind of a thing. It really does make things a lot easier to be successful. Saturn's trine with Mars also kind of adds an interesting element. Mars is very much focused on our inner trauma place, and Mars is very much associated with anger, although Mars is also associated with energy, but Mars tends to be associated with anger. So in some cases, Saturn is saying it is also absolutely your responsibility to deal with your old anger that's holding you back from achieving your goals. And that's not necessarily something that anybody wants to hear. I mean, I'm the first one to say, I don't want Saturn telling me nothing. Okay. Well, Saturn's been telling me for the past 3 years, but now he's moved on to you. So in many ways, that reminder that my past is my responsibility and how I emotionally handle my past is my responsibility did help me to release some of that stuff because it is my responsibility. And if these things are getting in the way of your success, um definitely necessary to eliminate them if they're getting in your way. Also, Saturn is in a sextile with Mercury. Mercury is also focused on career. So we're looking very hard at our career goals specifically, I feel, and we're really starting to look at those career goals. And it's actually very interesting because with Saturn's influence, we're looking at what we've already done, how far we wanted to be, and whether or not we've actually made it to that point so that we can adjust our goals accordingly. And that is the thing. Don't ever feel bad if you didn't make a goal date. You can always adjust it. It's your goal, right? Nobody's telling you you have to do this or that or the other thing. It is absolutely your goal, and life happens to people all the time. We have all kinds of glorious plans, and then the unknown shows up, and we are stuck doing something else, and we can't focus on our goal right now. We have to put it aside for the greater good of something else. It happens. You can always get back to it. So we have can also have Neptune in Pisces as well. which is in a sextile with Pluto. Pluto is your source of power and personal transformation, focused on relationships. This is also kind of giving you an idea, or maybe incorporating in there the need to really take a look at the relationships that you have supporting you in your career. Are these relationships working? Do we need to tweak a couple of things? A lot of times we form relationships with people that at first it works out great and it's like magic, and then after a while it just doesn't work anymore. And instead of getting mad about that, we need to move on to somebody that can help you out. I feel too, in this world right now, there's a whole lot of opportunities for us to point the finger at other people as to why we're not successful. And the truth is that that is such a useless waste of time. You're giving your power away. And Pluto is saying, don't ever give your power away. Own your shit. If you didn't do it, it doesn't matter what the reason is, the power lies within getting back to it. And it doesn't matter when you do it, as long as you do it. That's what's important. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And that's what I have for everybody. I'm Melissa Bruce, the Heavy Metal Psychic. Thank you for hanging out and watching the horoscopes this week. Hope you have a fantastic week. Make it a great week, because it is in your power to do so. I will see you guys next week. Take care, everybody.